Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela was born on July 18, 1918, in the village of Mvezo in the Eastern Cape of South Africa. His birth came into a world of layered identities, a world where African traditions and colonial law existed side by side, often uneasily. He was born into the Thembu royal family. His father, a local chief and counselor to the Thembu king, provided a household rooted in custom and responsibility. Rolihlahla, a name that would later be shortened to Nelson at school, literally means, pulling the branch of a tree, a colloquial word for a troublemaker. Names in his culture carried meaning, and this early name would prove prescient in a life that questioned the branches of authority. Mandela's childhood was shaped by two forces, the continuity of Xhosa tradition and the disruptive pressure of colonial authority. His father's death when Nelson was still a boy altered his path. The boy was taken under the guardianship of Jonjantaba Dalindyebo, regent of the Thembu, who raised him in the nearby village of Kunu. There, Mandela learned the rituals and responsibilities of a chief's household, how a leader was expected to behave, the importance of custom, and the value placed on dignity and service. Mandela's life took another turn when he was sent for formal education, a path that introduced him to Western names, Christian teachers, and new expectations. At a mission school he was given the name Nelson by a teacher, a small marker of the cultural transformation that missionary education often brought. He attended Clarkberry Boarding Institute and later Helltown, mission-run schools that taught reading, arithmetic, and the Bible alongside an emerging sense of modern identity. These institutions introduced Mandela to English language law and history, the very tools he would later use in his challenge to apartheid. Education broadened his horizons but also exposed the contradictions of colonial South Africa, the dignity of learning set against a society structured by segregation. At Fort Hare, the only university for black South Africans at the time, Mandela experienced student politics and racial intolerance firsthand. He arrived full of promise but was expelled in 1940 after joining a student protest against university authorities, an early taste of activism born out of principle. After Fort Hare, Mandela left the Eastern Cape for Johannesburg, a city of stark contrasts where black migrants sought work in mines and industries and where political ideas found fertile ground. In Johannesburg he worked as a mine security officer and later in law offices. The city offered him a new life and introduced him to political networks and activists who would become central to the anti-apartheid movement. It was in Johannesburg that Mandela met Walter Sisulu and Oliver Tambo, figures who would be lifelong colleagues. Together, they founded a law firm that served black clients shut out by the white legal establishment. For Mandela, law was not merely a profession, it was an instrument of social change. He witnessed in the courts how law could both oppress and liberate. His legal practice became a school of experience, real cases, real people, and a growing conviction that justice required collective action. Mandela's politics became formalized when he joined the African National Congress, ANC, in 1944. Young, impatient with the slow pace of change, Mandela and others formed the ANC Youth League. The Youth League sought to re-energize a movement that many felt had become too deferential. They argued for direct action, for mass mobilization, and for a modern politics that could mobilize the urban population. The 1940s were a time of hardening racial policies in South Africa. In 1948, the National Party won power and formalized apartheid, an ideological and bureaucratic system of racial separation that would define the country for decades. For Mandela and the Youth League, apartheid was an existential threat that demanded a new strategy, not only petitions and appeals but coordinated resistance. Mandela's transition from lawyer to activist accelerated in the early 1950s. The ANC's Defiance Campaign of 1952 marked a deliberate turn to civil disobedience. African, Indian, and colored communities coordinated acts of nonviolent resistance, defying past laws, occupying segregated benches, and deliberately challenging laws designed to humiliate and control. Mandela, a leading figure in these campaigns, faced arrests, fines, and harassment. The state reacted with repressive laws and police crackdowns. In this era he developed organizational skills and a sense of strategic patience, learning how to build coalitions across communities and how to prepare movements for both mass mobilization and state resistance. As the 1950s progressed, the South African state escalated its legal assault on the movement. Mandela and scores of other leaders were arrested and charged with high crimes. The Treason Trial, beginning in 1956, was one of the most significant legal ordeals. For years, dozens of leaders were tried on charges that sought to delegitimize resistance and to tie activism to violent overthrow. But the trial also provided a platform for Mandela and his co-accused to articulate the cause of freedom in public, to expose the moral bankruptcy of apartheid, and to build international sympathy. The lengthy proceedings, which ended in acquittals for many, helped to raise Mandela's profile from a regional activist to a national leader with moral authority.